So this is Monday, the 10th of May, 2021. These are the day's Fleet Street papers. This is the Financial Times, which you shall just put on side. This is the I newspaper, so called. These are the different titles, but the same theme of stupidity, darkness, idiocy, lying, capitulation, and collusion. And even the scum has got a clueless headline, which actually sums up the scum itself. When it comes to ethics, morality, and we haven't got this today's Guardian because the shop didn't have it. The Financial Times first, it's what is it called? FT Business Education, Executive Education 2021. And the cover is listing these. Cover, rivals with a different angle. Contenders take on business schools. Survey, what employers want. Chief learning officers polled. Directory, short course providers, open and custom programs. And the Financial Times, we have renamed Financial Crimes, and it is not likely to deviate from its criminal role. So it's continuing, but this is a pretend supplement on the looking like green. Thematic funds lure investors, that is the investors. And this is the crimes, the criminal focus of the financial crimes journalism, so-called. So let's look at the banner, top banner. There are 3 items on the banner. And that's the banner, and the 3 banner items we shall read in detail. Will China's space ambitions launch an orbital arms race? And rich promise, smart investors should support a net wealth tax. Now that is doubly corrupt. In praise of the office, it's people power that energizes the workplace. That's what they're saying. So it's all part of the theme of ending the lockdown. And this is the one that is the main item on the front page. Johnson to ease COVID rules as Sturgeon turns up the pressure. And we shall be diagnosing Johnson's latest act of dishonesty, which is being presented by the rest of Fleet Street as being an achievement, a quality. There is an unbelievable heading in the Financial Times. Absolutely unbelievable. It says, Netanyahu may be at the end of the road. Unbelievable headline in a British newspaper about Israel. And there is a piece on page 23, which is opposite the usual Financial Times editorial page, which reads, humanitarian aid cannot be allowed to fall foul of sanctions. And we shall look at that later. The toughest capitalists should root for a wealth tax. There's a piece by Martin Sanbu. Transformation is good but has to be managed. That is Rana Faruhar. As I said, that name Rana sounds very much like Arabic ways, but there's a piece by Peter Mandelson writing about after Hartlepool, Starmer must listen to voters, not Labour factions. And Mandelson is the former EU Trade Commissioner and UK Business Secretary, but the morons forget to mention that he was actually elected MP from Hartlepool. And it has got the first editorial is about Scotland and Johnson's game on how to manipulate the Scots. And the Financial Times is saying that it's not a good way. The way he's going, it's not going to produce results favorable to Johnson. And as we have been saying, Wales is after Scotland. And it's saying that the Wales First Minister warns of United Kingdom split without more devolution. So Mark Drakeford, we need home rule for Wales, more powers. So it's not the Wales one is not talking about independence, outright independence, as the Scottish ones are saying. And there is this whole piece about Israel delaying evictions from East Jerusalem. That is an second unprecedented headline about Israel, anything about Israel in a European paper. Because the European media, corrupt and racist as they already are, they have been fanatically, religiously devoted to the state of Israel. That is what they have been doing for nearly 80 years. The start of the Israeli state that began in the late 1940s. Now, we shall talk about the Palestinians and how the Fleet Street has been lying against the Palestinians, which is why I said that these two items, one is the Netanyahu has reached the end of the road. That is the unprecedented historic kind of heading ever seen on a British English newspaper from Fleet Street about the state of Israel. And the other is that Israel has stopped evictions from East Jerusalem. And here is the pandemic so-called update from Delhi by this Amy Kazmin. And Amy Kazmin is in denial. Although she is based in New Delhi, she's ignorant of what is going on in India and in New Delhi as well. Because this heading suggests that she has given the substance for the sub-editors at the Financial Times to write this heading: India's top court sets up task force to improve oxygen supply. Now she is missing the point that Narendra Modi, who unleashed the latest kind of surge, causing deaths of hundreds of thousands of people, is the main criminal. And he's so stupid that during his reign, he has handed over to the Supreme Court the duty to act as his front, as his legal front, so that any report that is written like this one, connecting any decision, any activity, any program with the Supreme Court, first of all, prima facie appears to be legitimate and respectable, which is the product of a cunning, corrupt strategy by Modi and whoever advises him. The Supreme Court should not be, there is no country in the world, no other country in the world that has been doing governing via its court system, whatever the defects of the system. India is the only country where every day the corrupt Modi regime is being misrepresented by the, well, it's a misuse of the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court and the court system, including the state, that is the provincial high courts, are being abused by the government, mainly Modi's government, wanting to give legitimacy to illegitimate behavior, to give respectability to disreputable behavior, massacres, and de facto genocide of the poor. India's Supreme Court said it would set up a task force. I mean, Supreme Court is not in there to set up anything. It is there to order the government to comply with orders that are deserved properly. So the Supreme Court is a corrupt organ of the BJP state. India's Supreme Court said it would set up a task force as part of efforts to improve the distribution of medical oxygen across the healthcare sector as the country battles a brutal second wave of COVID-19. And she is lying because Supreme Court has not been critical of the government. So her piece is completely false, misleading. So 500,000 people, or almost 1 million people, have already died. But this Amy Kazmin is hiding, suppressing the information about what is actually going on in India. And there is a promotion piece in the Financial Crimes for Melinda Gates. And they're elevating her to the status of powerful women who are changing philanthropy. That's a complete lie. She is not changing philanthropy for the victims of big business corruption and criminality, exploitation, robbery, and theft. Now, there is another piece about the so-called communication between Modi and the European Union about trade talks. And the Financial Times is behaving as financial crimes and giving Modi a positive kind of gloss. And it is really playing into his hands. This paragraph, the need to respond to the growing power and reach of Beijing has injected new momentum into dialogue between the European Union and Narendra Modi, the Indian Prime Minister, who held talks via video conference on Saturday. Relations between Brussels and Beijing have become increasingly tense, raising questions about the future of an investment partnership that received political backing last year. In March, the European Union joined Western partners in imposing sanctions against China. Well, read again, sanctions against Chinese officials over human rights violations. Beijing responded with sanctions on European officials and politicians. Now, that is the purpose for which the criminals at the Financial Times and the other media are recognizing the Uyghurs' persecution by the Chinese. This is what they're doing. They're using the Uyghurs. They're exploiting the Uyghur suffering and faking a concern about the Uyghurs because they're at war with Beijing. And that's the same war, that's the same strategy which has got as its part the relationship between the European Union and Narendra Modi's government in India. And so therefore they are giving a positive gloss to Narendra Modi and India. Brussels believes that India's decision to pull out of negotiations on a China-backed trade pact last year opened a window as New Delhi hunts for alternative partners. But it acknowledges that the European Union and India will face, well, India meaning Narendra Modi's kind of composition of the so-called government. And it's saying about historically, the EU and India will face an uphill battle if they are to achieve a comprehensive trade agreement following previous breakdowns in the talks. Earlier efforts by the EU and India stalled despite work between 2007 and 2013. Now, the Financial Crimes is ignoring the whole of the neighborhood. Pakistan and Bangladesh are being treated as if they don't exist. Now, between Pakistan and Bangladesh, there are 500 million people, nearly half of the Chinese population, and just under half of the Indian population. Now, if you include the Muslims of India or in India, then it would be more than half of India's population, the Muslims. So the Financial Crimes is in criminal denial of such a huge number of people affected by these tactics and criminal pretensions about the relationship between the countries and the task facing the country in the age, in the environment of the COVID virus. And there is a piece about inflation posing a risk to the American economic recovery. And there is a promotion about the Russian businessman who has got a new niche in animal food. And there are more promotions for big business and big executives. And they are promoting Boris Johnson as well about the leveling up proposals. They're saying that Johnson is under pressure to deliver on red wall promises. Well, Johnson cannot deliver red wall promises. He can only deliver more promises and scenarios and stunts with the collusion of the financial crimes and others. And they admit about future of the United Kingdom. They're saying that Sturgeon's victory sets stage for constitutional standoff. Historic fourth term touted as mandate for breakaway vote, but Johnson is unlikely to oblige. So that is the summary of the item and the kind of take by the financial crimes on the future of the confrontation between the supporters of Scottish independence and Boris Johnson. And this whole piece about the education, financial business, FT business education, executive education 2021 is about getting business back on track, how a crisis can be the mother of reinvention, and thinking beyond the campus, which says business schools found their executive education programs were hardest hit by the pandemic, but they have fought back with creative solutions. Now, in all of these, the financial crimes every day glorifies one set of executives, big business or another, glorifies one country like it is doing now, India, because of the confrontation between the West or British-led confrontation with China. So they are having a go at China and Chinese violations of the Uyghurs' human rights. Not mentioned in this piece that I've been going through in the financial crimes today, but generally in the context the last few months they have been doing this, inserting a reference to the Uyghurs without really meaning any real compassion, any solidarity, let alone any action to protect the Uyghur people from the Chinese massacre and genocide and persecution. Now, the I newspaper, which when it broke away from, or when it was sold by the two beards, was kind of temporarily receiving plaudits and praise. And the reason was that it became the first kind of tabloid with a kind of broadsheet content, and it was being circulated more widely than the Independent, which later became only online. And the Independent is running a piece by Jess Phillips. Now, Jess Phillips is the outspoken version of the women that have been around the deadly liar Keir Starmer, especially the likes of Rachel Reeves. Jess Phillips is an anti-Muslim racist, as she repeatedly showed in her open and televised hostility and confrontation. Hostility against and confrontation against the very small number of people that were protesting outside a school in Birmingham, which Jess Phillips repeatedly claimed to be in her constituency. And that happened a year or so before the Batley parents and guardians protest that happened earlier this year. Both protests have been manned and womaned by Muslim parents and guardians. There is no similar kind of record of parents of Hindu children or parents of Sikh children or parents of Chinese children or parents of African origin kind of black children doing anything like the kind of protest that Muslims appear to be engaged in from time to time. Why is that? If the experience of the Stratford School, where I organized the campaign in support of the parent guardians and governors in that school, Stratford School, starting in January 1992. If the evidence of that organization and campaign is any guide, updated by subsequent events in other places, then the reason why the media, Fleet Street, typified by Fleet Street, does report any such incidents is to be found in the motivation or the motivating factor. The motivating factor easily is located in Fleet Street's anti-Muslim kind of approach and strategy. If the name of the activist or organizing person or personnel sound like Muslim, then that's it. The morons, the racist and anti-Muslim morons in Fleet Street think and equate that to be some sort of existential threat against Britain by the Muslim crusaders. Well, the Muslim kind of opponents of the crusade. And it all relates back to the crusade and other things that have happened in the thousands years in between. So Muslims are, to begin with, assumed to be hostile to the West because they're Muslims. Not hostile to the West because of any wrongdoing by the West against the Muslims. And that psychosis, that kind of a mentality towards or against Muslims has been in existence and in process and is being inherited and passed on over centuries. Now, this requires education, doesn't it? This requires widespread and widely kind of pursued wide frame of education that actually tells the truth instead of this heritage and inheritance of hatred. There is no sign of any education coming. And the fact that Jess Phillips chose to attack the Muslim protesters outside a school illustrates the darkness in which Jess Phillips exists and breathes her kind of oxygen, whatever. And she was supported by a highly overhyped former Crown Prosecution Serviceman, Afzal. Afzal is based somewhere in Birmingham or near in the vicinity of Birmingham. And although Afzal is not any longer employed by the Crown Prosecution Service, Afzal is being used and has agreed to be used as an extension of the anti-Muslim propaganda narrative. Nothing to do with the Muslims being involved in any crime. The Muslim that is protesting ones that are critical of the particular curriculum and educational provisions. But Afzal has been willing to add the diversity display needed by the racists and anti-Muslims in the context of every such confrontation. So when Jess Phillips taunted the Muslim protesters, and the visual impact of her taunting, clearly Asian-looking parents, was that she got more kind of positive support and following from her intervention than the actual people protesting against something very fundamental and very serious and very important about education and the direction of the curriculum and the syllabus and so on. So, although she was claiming to be having to struggle to get a hearing because she alleged the protesting Muslims in that Birmingham series were too loud, too noisy, and too disruptive and too kind of overbearing, which they were not. Because the actual demands of those parents in Birmingham, not the ones in Batley, because the Batley thing was particularly about the Charlie Hebdo painting and drawing, the alleged drawing of the alleged picture of the Prophet, peace be on him. The protests against the particular school or schools involved in Birmingham concerned the sexual orientation and the inclusion of the program about the orientation, etc., in the curriculum or in the syllabus. Now, Afzal, who is a Pakistani origin person, readily condemned the protesters as being orchestrated and led by outsiders. And he accused them, the protesters as a whole, of having lied and falsified the basis on which they were protesting. That itself was a lie by Afzal, not by the protesting parents and guardians. So we talk about education, the need for education in Britain and the absence of education at the present time. Education, as it is now kind of traded and has been traded for hundreds of years, is misrepresented in the program that is supposed to be run in the name of education by the likes of Oxbridge and others that have been imitating them. Because education has not been any process, let alone a movement to liberate people from the clutches of oppression clashes of the various discrimination done to the ordinary people, that is to say, to use a phrase, done to the many by the few. And the fact that the likes of Jess Phillips can get the promoted, over promoted hypes right across the media sums up the narrative that the media wants to promote and hype, and the narrative that it wants to see implemented by the Labour Party. The media would prefer Jess Phillips to lead the Labour Party than Jeremy Corbyn, whom she threatened to murder within days of Corbyn getting elected first time as leader. And there was nothing wrong as far as the media was concerned with Jess Phillips threatening to murder Jeremy Corbyn. Imagine Corbyn saying that he would slap her one. If he had said even that, the Fleet Street media and the mainstream media in this country would have gone, as they say, ballistic. And they would have called for a third world war against Jeremy Corbyn. So, Jess Phillips, talking about the state of the Labour Party that has been murdered by her boss, Keir Starmer, is saying the people have accepted decline. We can change that. Now, that is absolutely stupid emptiness by Jess Phillips. Because the people have never accepted decline. What has happened is that the people have been deserted by the likes of her, contrary to her claim that she is very much involved and in touch with the people. Now, this is something that needs examining. Her last paragraph, it appears that this piece has been taken from The Independent. So her last paragraph in this piece, anyway, wherever it is taken from, says the lies that Boris Johnson tells are nothing compared to the illusion he created by matching low expectations with the promise of a rosy future that we never quite reach. We have got to get people to believe once again that decline is not a certainty and that they can and will get better. And that is from The Independent. This is not telling the truth because this is an obvious simplification, a lazy and ignorant simplification of the more rigorously kind of active factors. So she's talking about about the decline of schools, and she's talking about the fact that she only found out by accident that one school, severely affected by severe cuts by the Johnson administration, had started to close on Fridays. And she found out one Friday, as she was passing by the school, that was happening. And she then says that she didn't know about this otherwise, because not a single parent had told her about it. Notice that. And she's complaining. She's the one that had protested against protesting parents. Who were they? They were doing what she has found absent from the other parents. And the parents that were active in protesting were Muslim parents. And she doesn't like that. So the Muslims are doing the desirable thing, the thing that she is asking to be done by other parents. But when the Muslims do the right thing, she doesn't like that. Think about that. That is what makes Jess Phillips a racist, anti-Muslim, racist liar. And the fact that Jess Phillips is touted often, including by Murdoch's The Times, that she would be the leader of the Labour Party, or she would be the ideal leader of the Labour Party. How can she be ideal when she is so sunk and submerged in anti-Muslim hatred in her own constituency? In her own constituency, because when she attacked those parents protesting outside that school in Birmingham, she kept saying, because she was on television and we saw the evidence of her behavior on television or on video clips, she had to say, because we were outside, we are hundreds of miles away, that she was the MP who lived in the same constituency as the school was. So with people like Jess Phillips, who are ignorant and stupid and illogical, and the likes of her being touted as possible Labour Party leader, that's it. That cannot be a process of leading. She is comparing herself against Boris Johnson's lies and misleading kind of promises, etc. But she is one of the people, like Rachel Riley of the Channel 4 countdown presenter, countdown kind of maths presenter. Rachel Riley, Margaret Hodge, and Jess Phillips are among about 100, of course, white women in Britain that were recruited as part of the soldiers against the leadership of Jeremy Corbyn. Now, I hasten to add that I'm no fan of the qualities of leadership that Jeremy Corbyn displayed. I am referring to that equation that Jess Phillips and others were hounding Jeremy Corbyn, because I believe that they were unfair to Jeremy Corbyn as an individual, as a human being. And they completely misassigned so many alleged wrongdoing to him that they must be held to account for that role, that behavior. They were motivated by something we cannot say, because what it was, we have not been given the actual correlation. The correlational connection between Jess Phillips condemning Jeremy Corbyn, and threatening him with death at the beginning of Corbyn's leadership. We don't know why Jess Phillips hated or hates Jeremy Corbyn as much as she has done. But we do know that she was one of the anti-Labour Party kind of programs or propaganda wars, key weapons. Because she's a woman, she is from Birmingham, she's evidently she's young, and also, as has been pointed out by some of our fans, she is very attractive sexually. All of these were openly peddled to promote the image of Jess Phillips as the image of the sanity, rationality, and so on, as against the criminal, un-British composition of the Jeremy Corbyn leadership. That is what Jess Phillips did. She served as the poster girl that the Fleet Street picked from among the Labour Party MPs to hound Jeremy Corbyn with, to demonize Jeremy Corbyn with, which they did. So Margaret Hodge, who says that she was born in Egypt, in Cairo, but she is a member of the Oppenheim family. And the Oppenheim family name is linked to Germany, the region in Oppenheim in Germany. And the Oppenheim family is a very rich, wealthy family. So when Margaret Hodge foisted herself on the constituency in East London, she had no experience of being an average East Londoner, because she comes from a very wealthy family. But she decided, Margaret Hodge decided to exploit the racism that existed then and it still exists against people called migrants and immigrants. Why did she do that? Because having been born in Egypt is not quite the ideal way to become a racist in Britain, is it? But she craftily decided to become more anti-Muslim and more racist than the BNP and the National Front. She had no reason to be, except she wanted to out kind of racist, officially racist parties like the BNP, the National Front, so that she could get the support of those among the voters who are racist and who were craving for a racist candidate. And she has succeeded. And she is continuing to succeed to this day, which is more than a quarter of a century since she foisted herself on the Barking constituency. Barking and Dagenham, isn't it? And in that time, she has craftily taken part as a front woman while still carrying the badge as a Labour Party member of the concern, the type of concern that was used by Fleet Street about the north of England in the context of Brexit. That Corbyn was neglecting the concerns of the Red Wall constituencies about Brexit. Similarly, decades earlier, previously, Margaret Hodge accused the Labour Party and the anti-racists of betraying, abandoning the people of the constituency in Dagenham and Barking, who had concerns about the tide of migration that was threatening to swamp the constituency and East London and the country. Remember what I've said there? Swamp. Because that is a word I have taken from the broadcast made by Margaret Thatcher, another Margaret. Margaret Thatcher broadcast, probably in January 1978, a statement via the ITV's World in Action program that people were rather concerned or worried about being swamped. She didn't say swamped by migrants, but she didn't have to, because the predisposition of the people she was addressing already covered that part of the sentence. And the magic was done. Based and capitalized entirely, or mostly on that statement, Margaret Thatcher went on to feature as the new Enoch Powell. And she bagged the votes at the 1979 election. And she defeated James Callaghan, who had fronted the Labour Party up to that point. Now, as a racist, as I have said before, I had an encounter with the racist Callaghan, and I found him completely stupid and ignorant and unfit for purpose. What I'm saying there is that the election victory by Margaret Thatcher in 1979 was facilitated by James Callaghan, who had got in post indirectly after Harold Wilson suddenly resigned in 76. And Callaghan, in 78, when Thatcher appeared on the ITV World in Action program, failed. Callaghan failed to counter that racist incitement and hatred by the leader of a major party in Britain. Remember, that was that speech about people are concerned about being swamped that Margaret Thatcher broadcast from the ITV's World in Action program, served as her manifesto, and also made up the minds of people in the immediate aftermath of her speech, some of whom went on to commit racistly motivated murders, including the murder of Al-Tabali. Remember? That was 78. So January is the World in Action program that she appeared in. And she made a racist statement. And February, March, April, May, on the fourth month, this is the month of May. So in May 1978, two racists. Well, one was a white racist, and another was the African origin accomplice who only took part in the murder because of the racist brainwashing that so many African origin racists and anti-Asians go through and live the lives of an agent of white racists against Asians. That is part of the evidential analysis of the Black Lives Matter conundrum. I say conundrum only in the context of the silence of the, quote, African origin leadership of the Black Lives Matter or similar platforms before about the phenomenon of anti-Asian criminal activities done by the likes of the racist who was involved with the white racist in murdering Altabali in Whitechapel in 1978. Now, these are the facts that I'm reciting from absolute active memory. Anyone watching this who was around in Tower Hamlets in the immediate aftermath of the murder of Altabali on the 4th of May 1978, anyone who was actually involved in the kind of defense of the community against racists in the months that followed, and anyone was who either visited Brick Lane, Whitechapel, or Shadwell in those months and in the periods that followed can communicate to this program by direct message or by a message through Facebook what they remember as being the most important events in their memory of what was going on in that time. Now, I started talking about Jess Phillips, and I have covered Jess Phillips' role by updating on the role played by Margaret Hodge. I'll come to Margaret Hodge's constituency again because of what happened. Fleet Street media reported in, I think, May, if I'm not wrong, 1986. May 1986, Fleet Street papers reported my intervention at a gathering held in the House of Commons. And they completely got it wrong because they said that I had condemned Margaret Hodge's predecessor as the MP for Barking area, Joe Richardson. They said I had criticized Joe Richardson as a white racist woman. I did no such thing. What I did do was to condemn a racist woman, white woman, racist, who had remarked as I was entering the gathering that I could not enter, that I was not allowed. It was at her obstruction of me. I was a white young woman. I didn't know what her name was, and I couldn't care to know what her name was or whatever. But she obviously assumed that I should not be allowed. She didn't know who I was, and she had no right to point blank deny me access because she didn't introduce herself and she didn't set out her kind of entitlement or position or power or authority to deny me access or have any say on whether or not I could have access to that meeting. So I gave her a comprehensive mouthful, called her a racist, liar, and moron, the usual phrases that apply to behavior like that. Now, that was a gathering which was a Labour Party gathering. and it was attended by press. That was 1986, remember. So May 1986, either 30th of May or 31st. It couldn't be 31st, it was 30th of May. So I gave her a mouthful, and whoever was nearby, eavesdropping or overhearing me, must have kind of decided completely wrongly that I was there to attack Joe Richardson, who was about to chair the gathering, whatever the occasion was. It was a Labour Party political gathering, and I was there as a member of the Labour Party at the time. So I said that this racist woman is a moron and a liar and an idiot and all those words, because she had no right to say what she did say to me. And the following day, I think the 31st of May 1986, the Fleet Street papers had a report about me. And the main thing they said was that I had called Joe Richardson a racist woman. I had not. So that's another world exclusive revelation here in this series of broadcasts. Diagnosing, world exclusive diagnosis of Fleet Street. That is world exclusive again. And this takes me back to, again, Barking and Dagenham and Barking. Because the area Dagenham and Barking is a kind of area that demographically is made up of people that moved eastwards historically from the east end of London. So proportionately, the majority of them are white people. But in the last few decades, let's say from the 70s onwards, people from the subcontinent and people from other parts of the world, Africa, have begun to take up residence in those areas. But there is still an atmosphere of anti-Asian, anti-African hostility in the air. And it takes us back again to education. Because neither Margaret Hodge, as a Labour Party councillor in Islington, before she surfaced in the constituency that had been represented by Joe Richardson before her, neither Margaret Hodge nor any of the other leading women in the Labour Party had ever said or done anything about education. What am I meaning by education? I'm meaning that there was a two-fronted, if you like, failure, and has been, and is continuing to be a failure in and by the Labour Party, which hasn't got any education. Now, when Harold Wilson set up the Open University, he did a practical demonstration of a technical, mechanical kind of agenda and approach to education. The Open University is a racist, corrupt, criminally operated organization. And its role in educating people has been absolutely, brazenly overhyped and over kind of emphasized and oversold. It has not achieved most of the achievements that are attributed or ascribed to it. But the conception of the Open University by advisors, etc., Harold Wilson, contained ingredients and kind of fragments, elements of what could be education or educational policy. Education to me, and on the evidence of the world's experience of thousands of years, has to be about enlightenment. Has to be about enlightenment. And enlightenment in the best sense that is defined today. That is tolerance, kindness, generosity, powered by knowledge. Powered by knowledge and based on all the knowledge, best knowledge in all and from all sources. That education doesn't exist. And it has never existed in any of the Oxbridge or the kind of offshoots. And that is what is needed. That is what is needed in Britain. Well, we're talking about Britain, but that is what is needed by humanity everywhere. Education, powered by enlightenment, all these elements that I have just listed. Look at the problems of any kind: confrontation, hatred, rivalry, spite, jealousy, whatever is the motivation. You find that is based on the lack of education of the kind that I have defined. Okay, so that is the piece above the piece where they have quoted Jess Phillips from The Independent as an opinion. And there is a piece under the heading of politics. And then it says, party urged to get on top of issues as blame game begins. And there is a picture on the right side of the column, 2-column piece, of Diane Abbott. And on the left side is, of course, a big, much bigger picture of the liar Keir Starmer. Now, are they putting this heading as based on anything that Diane Abbott has said? We shall find out in a minute. And this piece is about Angela Rayner, and it contains quotes from Diane Abbott and from John MacDonald and from Andy Barnum. So it's not about racism, because they are saying that Diane Abbott said that Keir Starmer should revisit Labour's popular 2019 general election policies to form a clear vision that could be touted by candidates on doorsteps. On Sky News, Sophie Ridge on Sunday, Miss Abbott said, I think we need to be building on the policies in the 2019 manifesto, many of which were forward-thinking and popular. We need to get the strategy right? Well, Diane Abbott is not the correct person to be speaking in that way at all, because Diane Abbott has never been original, and Diane Abbott is not original now, and she never will be. Diane Abbott was invented, manufactured by racists all along, and she has never belonged to the actual politics of the anti-racist black communities deriving their origins in Africa and in Asia and in the Caribbean. Those were not corrupted by the careerism. I have had the kind of evidential experience of observing Diane Abbott for a very long time. And she is false. And this thing that she is being credited with, this quotation that she said that the 2019 manifesto contains the vision, is absolutely stupid. It avoids Brexit, and it avoids the reasons for Brexit, and it avoids the complete unfitness for purpose of that manifesto and of the UK state and the UK Parliament. And Diane Abbott should not be talking stupidity like that. Because in the background of her appearance, she's either related to Jeremy Corbyn, as she is in there, or she is not identified as a real voice of people campaigning for justice against racists and racism in this country. I was behind the conference that was held 40 years ago in December 1981. It was funded by the Commission for Racist Enslavement, CRE, which officially was called Commission for Racial Equality. And the Commission for Racist Enslavement, that I call it, was never against racism. And it could not be, because it was fronted by David Lane, a former Conservative member of Parliament who was himself racist, and by definition, he was very ignorant about the law, the constitution, the framework, the international order, the many charters and founding declarations of the United Nations. There was nobody ever present at any of David Lane's press dues that he organized, mainly for the so-called ethnicity-linked kind of, quote, editors. There was nobody in there who could fathom what was going on in this country at a given time. So what he did, David Lane, was arrange photo opportunities for himself so that all these grateful ethnicity-linked editors and publishers would feel grateful to publish anything he said or spewed. What I represent and represented was totally the opposite of what was going on at every stage. It is therefore understandable, rationally, that David Lane should give orders to the security personnel to block my attendance at these events. It's not like I was carrying a weapon, either a stick or anything like that. But the weapon was in my questions. And David Lane was not equipped to handle my questions, nor was his successor in post. Peter Newsom, the racist moron. So what I said about Margaret Beckett and Joe Richardson and Jess Phillips and about Diane Abbott, these are universal values that I have been advocating and values that have been beyond the comprehension of these racists and these self-servers and these stooges and these idiots. So I go back to the events of May 1978 when this Bangladeshi young person, Altaf Ali, was murdered in the Whitechapel Road. And I came to know about this within 24 hours. I wasn't present at the location or in the vicinity. And my first response to those who told me about this incident was for the community in Tower Hamlets, the Bangladeshis, to mobilize against racist attacks and racist hostility and prejudice and so on. Because remember, in 1978, racists were physically attacking people in and around and near Brick Lane. They were stabbing people, pushing them, spitting on them, and so on. So most of the people in Bangladeshi community at that time felt safer to walk in groups, or at least individual Bangladeshis were feeling uncertain and afraid and scared to walk any significant distance on their own. That was a direct result of the lack of safety that existed. Any true education program today, 2021, any program that refers to what happened in 1978 must have at the top of the list of items to be taught. Those days when racists were openly spitting on people because of the people's supposed inferior color. How could our color be inferior to anybody else's? And the fact that racists were able to do that, and most of them were not even being arrested, showed the basis on which the policing in this country was kind of operated. Policing didn't include protecting people, victims of such manifest brazen hatred from these attacks and these violations and this contemptible behavior and attacks and harassment. Because everyone who suffered any kind of attack like that had a lasting impact on their self-esteem and their sense of confidence got permanently shaken. That was the outside and not the slogans. That was the reality of racist attacks in 1978. And those attacks, of course, formed the background against which the murder of Altaf Ali in May 78 became the trigger for mobilization. So we held the first mobilizing political awareness raising rally at the cinema hall in Commercial Road on the Sunday, the 7th of May, 1978. And I was on the main stage, which was not for very long because the people who turned up at that gathering in the main are very, very kind of shaken and nervous and kind of on edge. And some of them could have done very serious damage in the political context, because some of them said to me, let's go and murder some white people going past here. The last thing I would allow to be done in my presence. I said, no way are we going to even physically touch a white person. Because the strategy and the technique was to maintain our superiority, moral height, that we are the innocent people who have been attacked by racists because of our color. Absolutely unacceptable. So that was the moral height. And that is something that we had to preserve, that we are the innocent victims of racists. That would have changed altogether if even a white person was kind of punched in the face, which I was not going to have anything to do with whatsoever. Now that is called vision. Not Diana about repeating the stupid pack fronted by Corbyn et al. In 2019. The vision, Lars, the vision that I showed in 1978, in May 78, remains and had been in existence, that we cannot condemn violence if we are ourselves violent. Well, that was a statement that we had to make to the wider public, the wider society. And every time there has been a moral height and superiority by the people who have been attacked by racists and liars and haters, eventually the argument has been absolutely critically won by our maintaining the moral superiority, by not attacking anyone, attacking innocent people. In any case, the real perpetrators of the racist status quo who control the power in society can never be found in the streets. So anyone, by definition, who is targeted for a revenge, retaliation, is bound to be innocent person, innocent in relation to the power structure. So we managed to stop the moral height to be from being dropped by anyone attacking an innocent person or white passerby. Anyone who wants to see the kind of map of the Commercial Road, you can look up Commercial Road E1 and it will be there. And the place that the rally was held was called in France, the French name was Grand Palais. That is the Grand Palais Cinema Hall. It was used as a cinema hall for quite a while. It is no longer the case. It's now occupied by multiple small businesses and probably a few flats. But that is what we did as a very quickly decided kind of decision in order to handle this very angry gathering of people that had gathered there in response to the call that we made 3 days after we organized it on Saturday, and Friday, Saturday, the meeting took place on Sunday, the 7th of May. Now that height, the moral height, was maintained as long as we could control the proceedings. And we could only control the proceedings until the SWP saboteurs arrived on the scene, and some other crooks, including elements from what they called the Hackney Asian Association, which later became completely discredited because of the corruption by its members. 3 of them came to Tower Hamlets to give solidarity. In fact, they wanted to hijack the kind of platform and promote their careers, whatever. And one of them, Patrick Kodikara, did manage to get a career out of it. Patrick Kodikara was a social worker, but essentially he arrived in Tower Hamlets in order to hijack the campaign so that he could say that he had organized all of that. Kodikara never did. Nor did the other two. The other two are Bengalis from West Bengal. But what they did was to do their own little things. And there was no solidarity with the actual thinking company, organizers of the campaign. That was me. I mean, they shunned me. They shunned me. They thought they shunned me. But they were not shunning me. And I wasn't interested in what they were doing because I was interested in confronting the agenda of the racist, the agenda of the state, the duties of the police, the role of Peter Shaw. I mean, Peter Shaw was the racist who would not have the meeting with stooges that he held at the Toynbee Hall until I left the meeting. Why was he afraid? Think about that. I was the only one who could ask him questions, challenge him, and demand answers, but he made sure that the stooges went along with him, insisting that I had to leave the meeting before it started. Peter Shaw. Peter Shaw didn't want to answer questions from me. And he was quite happy to be talking to the stooges. And the stooges remained obedient and didn't object to Peter Shaw saying that I should leave the meeting. I had not done anything wrong, and I had not threatened to do anything wrong. In fact, I was there to offer my advice and my wisdom and my expertise and my thoughts and so on to make the meeting more productive and more kind of relevant to the needs to systematically and organizationally and politically challenge and oppose and identify racism and prevent further tragedies and further losses of life and safety of people. But Shore was not going to accept that because I was more able than he was. He knew that. So he would not have that meeting while I was there. And he knew that the stooges included some of the long-standing stooges that had practically worshipped him because he was a white man. And these were stooges made in the image of Uncle Tom, of eternity, of eternal disgrace and stupidity. These people didn't want a campaign in response to the murder of Al-Tawali. And some of the criminals have been saying recently, in recent years, that the murder of Al-Tawali was not racist. That we, the community, somehow invented the racist link to that murder. Can you imagine that? So we shall be continuing. This is 10:32 hours GMT, and we shall be continuing in the next parts. This is part 2 ending at 10:32 GMT.